In the first few seconds of this video, your brain has already begun spinning a story about who you are, what you can achieve, and what your limitations might be. And yet almost none of that story is accurate, because your mind is constantly feeding you lies that feel true, convincing you that your fears are reality, your assumptions are facts, and your self-image is unchangeable. And this is happening right now, even as you watch, because your consciousness is merely following the scripts written long before you were aware enough to question them. You believe that your thoughts are objective reflections of the world, that your emotions are reliable guides, and that the interpretations you make about yourself and others are correct. But the truth is that your brain is a master storyteller, capable of creating entire worlds of illusion in which you are both the protagonist and the victim. And these illusions are crafted not to deceive maliciously, but to preserve survival, avoid pain, and maintain the illusion of control. Which means the lies your mind tells are as functional as they are dangerous. One of the most insidious lies your mind tells is that you are limited by your current circumstances, that the setbacks you experience define your potential, and that failure is evidence of your incapability, when in reality, your mind is projecting the patterns of past experiences onto present conditions, ignoring the fact that neural plasticity, resilience, and human adaptability allow for growth far beyond what your conscious or unconscious fears suggest. And yet, you continue to obey the narrative of scarcity, limitation, and self-doubt as if it were law. Another pervasive lie is that your self-worth is dependent on others' opinions, approval, or validation. And your mind constantly evaluates social cues, comments, gestures, and expressions, assigning them exaggerated significance, interpreting neutral or ambiguous behavior as rejection, criticism, or disapproval, and then using these perceived judgments to reinforce a story in which you are insufficient, unlovable, or incapable of being accepted, all while presenting this narrative as reality rather than what it truly is, a mental projection shaped by insecurity and conditioned beliefs. Your mind also convinces you that discomfort equals danger, that uncertainty is threatening, and that emotional pain is to be avoided at all costs. And so it warns you incessantly against taking risks, challenging yourself, or stepping into the unknown, even when the very act of stepping into discomfort is the mechanism through which growth, self-discovery, and fulfillment are achieved. And yet your nervous system perceives risk as threat and interprets hesitation as wisdom, when in truth it is fear masquerading as prudence. Perhaps the most powerful lie your mind tells is that your past defines you, that the decisions, failures, and traumas you experienced are permanent markers of who you are and who you can become, and that the emotional residue of yesterday must dictate your reality today. And this creates a cycle of self-fulfilling prophecy in which the belief in limitation produces behaviors that reinforce limitation, which reinforces the belief until you begin to mistake the lie for truth, the illusion for reality, and the pattern for destiny. Your mind is also skilled at manufacturing scarcity, convincing you that time, opportunity, love, or resources are limited, which triggers anxiety, competition, and overexertion, and makes you act from a place of fear rather than creativity, abundance, or curiosity, even though the actual universe operates on principles of endless potential, adaptability, and unexpected opportunity. And yet your perception is distorted to feel scarcity so that you cling to what is safe and familiar rather than venturing into growth. Another daily lie is that your emotions are reliable signals for decision-making, when in reality, emotions are biochemical reactions shaped by past experiences, survival mechanisms, and unconscious conditioning. And while they provide valuable information about your internal state, the brain interprets them as absolute truth, causing you to act impulsively, overreact, or misjudge situations, and then reinforces the story that you are reactive or incapable of self-control, when in fact, your nervous system is simply responding to outdated patterns. Your mind further convinces you that you have to figure everything out before taking action, that waiting for clarity, certainty, or confidence is necessary before progress can occur, and that hesitation is wisdom rather than avoidance. And this lie keeps you trapped in cycles of procrastination, self-doubt, and analysis paralysis, even though action itself generates clarity, momentum, and understanding. And the most successful transformations occur precisely when imperfect action is taken before full understanding is achieved. You are also constantly fed the lie that suffering is permanent, that pain must be endured indefinitely, and that emotional discomfort will never end, which heightens stress, reinforces pessimism, and magnifies negative thinking. And yet neuroscience shows that all experiences, including suffering, are temporary, processed by a brain capable of recalibration and resilience. And yet your mind disguises transience as permanence, making every challenge feel like an eternal sentence rather than a temporary state. Even the lie that your identity is fixed is repeated daily, convincing you that your personality, abilities, and potential are predetermined, immutable, and limited by circumstances beyond your control, which inhibits experimentation, growth, and exploration, while ignoring the neurological reality that your brain is plastic, adaptable, and capable of rewiring itself throughout life. And that identity is a dynamic process shaped by choices, habits, and repeated behaviors rather than fixed characteristics encoded in stone. You also accept the lie that failure is catastrophic, that mistakes define you, and that errors cannot be recovered from, which generates paralysis, anxiety, and fear-driven decision-making, while simultaneously ignoring that failure is a mechanism for learning, adaptation, and growth, and that your mind exaggerates the consequences of mistakes to prevent risk-taking rather than to reflect reality, creating a distorted perception of danger that feeds hesitation rather than opportunity. The lie of comparison is another one you unconsciously believe every day, because your mind constantly measures your achievements, appearance, and status against others, interpreting differences as deficits, inadequacy, or lack. And while it presents this as objectivity, it is actually a distorted lens that emphasizes scarcity, envy, and self-criticism, and ignores context, individuality, and personal growth trajectories, ensuring that you continually undervalue your accomplishments and inflate the accomplishments of others. Your mind also tells you that external validation is essential, convincing you that recognition, praise, and social acknowledgement define your competence, self-worth, and value, when in fact, self-validation, integrity, and internal alignment are far more predictive of fulfillment, confidence, and authenticity. Yet the brain equates social reward with survival, making social approval feel indispensable, and perpetuating dependence on external cues for internal stability. And finally, the mind convinces you that change is dangerous, that leaving the familiar, safe, or comfortable is reckless, and that the unknown is to be feared rather than explored. And this daily narrative keeps you in cycles of stagnation, overthinking, and resistance, even though the same brain is capable of adaptation, learning, and growth, and is wired to thrive in response to novel stimuli when the fear-driven interpretation is recognized and disrupted. If you pause right now and examine your thoughts, you will notice how many of these lies you unconsciously believe because the mind repeats them so often, reinforces them through selective attention, and interprets experience to align with them. And until you bring awareness to these deceptive narratives, your thoughts, emotions, and decisions will continue to be guided by fiction rather than reality. Understanding that these lies exist is not merely intellectual. It is the first step toward reclaiming autonomy over your mind. Because once you identify a thought as a distortion, exaggeration, or falsehood, you can interrupt its influence, choose a different narrative, and gradually retrain your nervous system to respond to truth rather than to fiction, perception rather than imagination, and reality rather than compulsion. And in the next section, you are going to uncover the specific mechanisms your brain uses to maintain these lies, why they feel undeniable, and how they manipulate your behavior without conscious permission, which will reveal not only the hidden power of your mind, but also the exact leverage points where you can regain control over your thoughts, choices, and perception of reality. Your brain has a remarkable ability to construct entire worlds of illusion, not out of malice, but out of efficiency, survival, and habit. And it does this by using a set of invisible mechanisms that operate without your awareness, convincing you that your perceptions are reality, your fears are rational, and your assumptions are objective, which is why the lies your mind tells feel undeniable, unshakable, and often more real than the actual world around you. One of the most powerful mechanisms your mind uses is selective attention, which filters information to reinforce existing beliefs, biases, and narratives. And this means that every time you experience something that contradicts your assumptions, your brain either ignores it, downplays it, or reinterprets it to fit the existing story, ensuring that the lie maintains its authority, even in the face of overwhelming evidence to the contrary, and making you unaware of how distorted your perception has become. Closely related to this is confirmation bias, which convinces you to seek out, remember, and emphasize experiences that validate your pre-existing beliefs, while discounting, forgetting, or rationalizing experiences that challenge them, creating a feedback loop in which your brain repeatedly produces the same narrative, which you then accept as truth, reinforcing the very patterns that keep you constrained, anxious, or self-critical, even though they are based on distortion rather than fact. Your mind also exaggerates threats and diminishes opportunities, a mechanism rooted in survival instincts, because the brain evolved to prioritize danger over reward to ensure survival in uncertain environments. And while this was useful in ancestral contexts, it now manifests as chronic worry, overestimation of risk, and avoidance of growth opportunities, making fear feel rational, even when the actual probability of harm is minimal, and reinforcing the daily lies that the world is more dangerous than it is, and that inaction is safer than exploration. Emotional reasoning is another subtle tool your mind uses to maintain lies, convincing you that how you feel reflects what is true. And so when anxiety, sadness, guilt, or anger arise, your brain interprets them as indicators that something is wrong with you, with others, or with reality itself, when in fact emotions are merely signals, chemical fluctuations, and patterns of interpretation, not direct reflections of objective truth. Yet you accept them as undeniable evidence, further cementing the deceptive stories your brain tells. The brain also employs overgeneralization, which takes single incidents, failures, or conflicts, and expands them into sweeping conclusions about your character, your abilities, or your future. And this mechanism ensures that one mistake is remembered as proof of permanent inadequacy. One rejection becomes evidence that no one will ever accept you, and one setback becomes the foundation for the narrative that life is hopeless, which reinforces the lies about limitation, incompetence, and unworthiness that your mind repeats daily. Catastrophizing works in tandem with this, magnifying small problems into perceived disasters, convincing you that minor inconveniences, rejections, or mistakes will have irreversible consequences. And while this keeps you cautious, it also traps you in cycles of anxiety, rumination, and self-doubt, making your mind a constant storyteller of worst-case scenarios and presenting these exaggerated narratives as unassailable truths that demand your attention, emotional energy, and compliance. Another tool your mind uses is personalization, which convinces you that events, actions, or outcomes are directly about you, even when they are not, and it interprets others' behavior through a lens of self-reference, making you feel responsible for problems, misunderstandings, or misfortunes that have little to do with you, which reinforces the lie that your worth is contingent on control, performance, or approval, and that every social interaction is a measure of your adequacy. The mind also manipulates memory to maintain lies, because memory is reconstructive, not photographic. And each time you recall an event, your brain subtly changes the details to align with your current beliefs, fears, and assumptions, which means your recollection of past successes, failures, or interactions is biased to reinforce the narrative your mind wants you to believe. And these distorted memories feel as real and reliable as if they were objective truth, further entrenching the lies you live by daily. Your inner critic is another mechanism, a voice that evaluates, judges, and critiques your actions, thoughts, and character incessantly, which your brain interprets as guidance, self-awareness, or moral clarity, when in reality it is often a distorted echo of old beliefs, fears, and societal expectations. And it repeats lies about inadequacy, failure, or unworthiness under the guise of truth, ensuring that you accept its verdicts as accurate reflections of your self-worth. The brain also relies heavily on heuristics, mental shortcuts that simplify decision-making, and while they save cognitive energy, they also perpetuate lies, because these shortcuts often overemphasize patterns, generalize from insufficient information, and default to familiar outcomes, leading you to make decisions that feel rational and justified, but are in fact guided by false assumptions and outdated conditioning. Projection is another daily tool in which the mind attributes its own fears, insecurities, or negative traits onto others, convincing you that the problem lies outside of yourself, in colleagues, friends, partners, or society, when in reality the origin is internal, and this externalization of responsibility reinforces the lie that you are a victim of circumstances rather than an active participant capable of choice and change. Your brain also relies on comparison, constantly measuring your life, abilities, and success against others. And because social comparison magnifies perceived deficits while minimizing strengths, it convinces you that you are falling short, that you are inadequate, and that you are less than, even when objectively you are capable, talented, and evolving. And the mind presents this distortion as a clear reflection of reality. Negativity bias is another tool which amplifies negative experiences, feedback, and outcomes while downplaying positive ones, convincing you that setbacks are monumental, threats are immediate, and joy is fleeting, while obscuring evidence of growth, achievement, and progress, which strengthens the daily lie that life is harder, harsher, and more unforgiving than it actually is, and ensures that your attention and energy are dominated by worry and self-doubt. The mind also engages in self-fulfilling prophecies, where the expectations it builds about failure, rejection, or inadequacy influence your behavior in ways that produce the very outcomes it predicted, creating the illusion that its lies are true, when in fact, your brain is manufacturing reality to match its distorted narrative. And every time this happens, the lie is reinforced and becomes harder to challenge. Rumination is another mechanism that strengthens lies, because repeated mental rehearsal of fears, insecurities, and imagined failures deepens their neural pathways, making them feel automatic, true, and unavoidable. And even when evidence exists to the contrary, your brain interprets the frequency and intensity of these thoughts as confirmation, ensuring that the lie becomes a dominant force in perception and decision-making. All of these mechanisms, selective attention, confirmation bias, emotional reasoning, overgeneralization, catastrophizing, personalization, memory distortion, inner criticism, projection, comparison, negativity bias, and rumination, work in concert to convince you every single day that your fears, assumptions, and limitations are true. And the result is that you live a life governed not by objective reality, but by the manufactured lies of a brain that prioritizes survival over truth, repetition over growth, and fear over possibility. And in the next section, you are going to explore how these mechanisms interact with your behavior, your decisions, and your perception of yourself and the world, revealing not just the lies themselves, but the hidden impact they have on your life, relationships, and potential, and how becoming aware of these patterns creates the possibility of reclaiming your mind from the stories it tells. Once you begin to see the mechanisms behind the lies your mind tells, you start noticing how much of your daily behavior, choices, and interactions are influenced not by reality, but by these internal distortions. And this realization can be uncomfortable because it exposes how much control you have unconsciously surrendered to a mind that prioritizes survival, fear, and habit over clarity, growth, and truth. For example, the lie that failure defines you often causes you to hesitate before taking risks, to overanalyze before acting, or to avoid opportunities that could lead to significant growth. And while it feels like caution or prudence, it is actually a behavior rooted in old patterns of self-protection, where the brain interprets mistakes or rejection as threats to your identity, making avoidance feel safer than action, even though stagnation carries its own hidden costs. Similarly, the lie that others' opinions determine your worth drives many decisions in relationships, career choices, and social interactions, because your brain is constantly scanning for approval, constructing scenarios of judgment, and interpreting neutral signals as either affirmation or rejection, which reinforces the false belief that your value is conditional and keeps you tethered to the validation of people who have no real stake in your growth or self-acceptance. The lie that discomfort equals danger affects not just bold decisions, but daily routines, social interactions, and self-expression, because your nervous system reacts to uncertainty with heightened alertness, physiological stress, and subconscious avoidance, convincing you that risk, novelty, or emotional honesty are unsafe, when in reality the discomfort is temporary. Your nervous system is capable of recalibration, and the experience of facing the unknown is essential for learning, resilience, and fulfillment. Projection also shapes your perception of conflict and social dynamics, because when your mind projects your insecurities onto others, you interpret their behavior as criticism, hostility, or judgment, and this creates unnecessary tension, misunderstandings, and self-doubt, reinforcing the lie that the world is against you, when in reality, much of what you perceive is a reflection of your own internal state rather than objective reality. Overgeneralization and catastrophizing frequently interact to create persistent narratives of limitation, injustice, or failure, because a single negative experience becomes proof that all experiences will be similar, magnified, or irreversible, which not only increases anxiety and stress, but also limits experimentation, creativity, and opportunity. And yet the mind presents these conclusions as rational, inescapable truths that must guide behavior. Memory distortion further deepens the influence of lies, because the brain reconstructs past events to fit existing narratives, which means your recollection of successes, failures, or interpersonal experiences is biased to reinforce the patterns your mind wants to maintain. And every time you recall these memories, they are subtly altered, which makes it increasingly difficult to distinguish between what actually happened and what your brain wants you to believe happened. Comparison, fueled by social media, observation, or cultural expectations, keeps you trapped in a loop of inadequacy, because your mind highlights the achievements, possessions, and appearance of others while minimizing your own progress, generating envy, self-criticism, and anxiety, and reinforcing the lie that you are failing or falling behind, even when objectively your life is on a path of growth and potential. Rumination ensures that these lies are rehearsed and strengthened, because repeatedly thinking about perceived failures, fears, and insecurities deepens their neural pathways, making them feel automatic, habitual, and unavoidable. And this repetition convinces the brain that these thoughts are not distortions, but accurate reflections of reality, which traps you in cycles of anxiety, self-doubt, and inaction. Even positive experiences are interpreted through the lens of these lies, because the mind has a negativity bias, which amplifies threats, failures, and discomfort, while diminishing achievements, praise, and progress, ensuring that even moments of success are undercut by doubt, worry, or fear, reinforcing the false narrative that nothing is sufficient, nothing is permanent, and nothing is fully reliable. The inner critic orchestrates many of these distortions in tandem, constantly evaluating, judging, and critiquing your actions, thoughts, and intentions, presenting these judgments as rational, objective truth, and convincing you that your inadequacies, mistakes, and insecurities define your reality, which keeps you tethered to fear, self-doubt, and habitual patterns, rather than empowerment, insight, and self-compassion. Decision-making is profoundly affected by these mechanisms, because the brain interprets risk, uncertainty, and novelty through the lens of fear and distortion rather than logic or evidence, which means choices are often guided by lies rather than reality, and the consequences of avoiding discomfort, clinging to familiarity, or seeking external validation compound over time, reinforcing the very patterns that limit growth and fulfillment. Even your perception of relationships is shaped by these lies, because selective attention and projection influence how you interpret the words, actions, and intentions of others, often magnifying perceived slights, misjudgments, or dangers, and constructing a narrative in which connection is conditional, fleeting, or threatening, which leads to misunderstandings, defensive behavior, and emotional isolation, reinforcing the false belief that trust is dangerous and intimacy is risky. The mind also perpetuates the lie that identity is fixed, convincing you that your personality, capabilities, and potential are predetermined, which restricts experimentation, learning, and exploration, and makes deviation from familiar patterns feel unsafe, unnatural, or disloyal to who you are. Even though identity is a dynamic construct shaped by repeated choices, behaviors, and conscious attention, self-fulfilling prophecies reinforce these patterns, because the expectations you hold influence your actions, which produce outcomes that appear to validate the expectations, creating the illusion that your beliefs about limitation, inadequacy, or risk are reality, when in fact the mind has manufactured the conditions to make its own lies appear true. All of these mechanisms interact in subtle, complex ways to create a daily reality in which the lies your mind tells feel undeniable, unquestionable, and rational. And yet awareness of these patterns allows you to recognize the distortions, interrupt their influence, and begin reclaiming your perception, choices, and emotional life from the stories your brain insists are true. In the next section, you will explore the consequences of living under these lies, how they shape your life, relationships, and sense of self, and the subtle, often hidden ways they limit your potential, manipulate your decisions, and influence your daily experience, revealing both the costs of unconscious belief and the opportunities that arise once awareness begins. Living under the influence of these lies profoundly shapes the way you experience your life, because every thought, every decision, and every interaction is filtered through a distorted lens that convinces you reality is harsher, your abilities are weaker, and your potential is smaller than it truly is. And while these distortions feel automatic and unavoidable, they are in fact patterns that can be recognized, challenged, and rewired once you become aware of them. The consequences of believing these daily lies are far-reaching, because they subtly dictate your career choices, your social relationships, and your personal ambitions, making you prioritize safety over growth, familiarity over curiosity, and approval over authenticity. And yet these decisions feel rational, reasonable, and necessary, even when they keep you trapped in cycles of underachievement, self-doubt, and dissatisfaction. Your confidence erodes, not because you lack skill, intelligence, or talent, but because the mind constantly reminds you of perceived inadequacies, magnifies mistakes, and diminishes accomplishments, creating a persistent narrative that you are not enough, even when external evidence proves otherwise. And this narrative subtly directs your energy, focus, and ambition toward avoidance, self-protection, and hesitation, rather than exploration, creation, and boldness. Relationships are also profoundly affected, because the lies your mind tells shape how you interpret the actions, words, and intentions of others, often leading you to misread signals, anticipate rejection, and project fears onto partners, friends, and colleagues, which perpetuates misunderstandings, distance, and conflict, and reinforces the false belief that people cannot be trusted. Connection is risky, and emotional safety is temporary. The lie that discomfort equals danger prevents you from fully embracing growth opportunities, because it convinces you that risk, failure, or vulnerability will lead to catastrophe. And this keeps you in patterns of procrastination, avoidance, and overanalysis, which in turn reinforces the false story that life is unsafe, opportunities are scarce, and courage is too costly, while the actual reality is that discomfort is the catalyst for learning, transformation, and resilience. Your mind's exaggeration of threats and minimization of opportunities also drives chronic anxiety, because even small challenges are magnified into overwhelming problems, and potential successes are overlooked, downplayed, or dismissed, creating an internal narrative that danger is omnipresent, resources are insufficient, and outcomes are inevitably negative, which affects not just emotional well-being, but physical health, cognitive performance, and overall life satisfaction. The inner critic's voice compounds these consequences, because it constantly evaluates, judges, and critiques every thought, action, and decision, framing them as evidence of failure, inadequacy, or incompetence. And while you may believe this criticism is reality-based or even protective, it actually serves to maintain the lie that your worth is contingent on perfection, performance, or control. And this reinforces stress, self-doubt, and hesitancy across all areas of life. Selective attention ensures that you focus on experiences that confirm your fears, limitations, and insecurities, which deepens the consequences of the lies, because every perceived failure or criticism is highlighted, remembered, and magnified, while successes, validations, and evidence of competence are minimized, forgotten, or rationalized. reinforcing the story that the world is against you. You are inadequate, and challenges are insurmountable. Even small daily decisions are influenced, because the mind continuously anticipates danger, predicts failure, and calculates risk through distorted patterns, leading you to choose caution over exploration, avoidance over engagement, and conformity over authenticity. And while these choices feel rational, they subtly limit potential, constrain growth, and ensure that your life trajectory aligns with the lies your mind perpetuates rather than the reality of possibility and capability. The reinforcement of these lies in memory further amplifies their consequences, because every recall of past experiences is subtly reconstructed to align with the existing narrative, making each memory a building block in the structure of deception, which then guides expectations, behavior, and perception in the present, creating a continuous loop in which the brain manufactures evidence to validate its own falsehoods, ensuring the persistence of limitation and self-doubt. Social comparison deepens the impact, because observing others' achievements, appearance, or success is interpreted through a distorted lens, amplifying feelings of inadequacy, envy, or failure, and minimizing the progress, uniqueness, and growth that you have actually achieved, which reinforces the lie that you are behind, insufficient, or incapable of reaching the standards you believe are necessary, and further erodes motivation, self-esteem, and confidence. Rumination exacerbates consequences by repeatedly rehearsing fears, insecurities, and imagined threats, which strengthens neural pathways associated with negativity, anxiety, and self-doubt, making these reactions feel automatic, inevitable, and rational, and ensuring that even moments of success, joy, or competence are overshadowed by mental replay of failure, danger, or inadequacy, keeping your perception aligned with the lies rather than reality. The cumulative effect of all these mechanisms is that life feels more constrained, stressful, and threatening than it truly is, because every thought, feeling, and decision is subtly influenced by the lies your mind tells, which shapes not only your behavior, but your emotional experience, your expectations of others, and your vision of what is possible, creating an invisible prison that is maintained by the very organ that could also set you free. Even when objective evidence of success, opportunity, or love exists, these lies distort interpretation, making achievements feel insufficient, opportunities seem scarce, and connection appear fragile, because the mind prioritizes familiar patterns of fear and self-doubt over new experiences that challenge its existing narrative, which reinforces limitation, hesitation, and emotional tension across all domains of life. Ultimately, the consequence of believing these lies daily is that you are living not in reality, but in a filtered, distorted, fear-driven simulation, in which growth is delayed, potential is hidden, and fulfillment is obscured. And yet, this system is malleable, because the brain is capable of recognizing distortions, recalibrating interpretations, and forming new, healthier patterns of perception, decision-making, and emotional response when awareness and intentional practice are applied. In the next section, you will discover the methods, tools, and strategies that allow you to recognize these lies in real time, disrupt their automatic influence, and begin retraining your mind to respond to truth, clarity, and possibility, rather than fear, habit, and distortion, revealing the path to reclaiming control over your perception, choices, and life. It is unsettling to realize that even when you believe you are finally becoming aware of your mind's deceptions, another quiet lie is forming in the background, shaping the way you interpret the world, your relationships, your future, and even your sense of worth. And that lie is the belief that awareness alone is enough to protect you, because your mind convinces you that now that you can see the patterns, you are immune to them, when in reality, awareness without action often becomes just another comforting illusion that keeps you in place rather than moving you forward. Many people walk around congratulating themselves for being self-aware, yet they continue to choose the same destructive partners, repeat the same habits, sabotage the same opportunities, and feed the same fears because the mind has replaced one lie with another, and that new lie sounds sophisticated, intelligent, and mature enough to avoid suspicion. You might have caught yourself saying, "At least I know what's wrong with me," as if knowing automatically equals healing, as if naming the wound somehow closes it, as if insight alone rewires the brain. But the uncomfortable truth is that knowledge without consistent, uncomfortable change is just entertainment for the ego, not transformation for the mind. Another lie your mind believes every day is that you are running out of time, and that because of your age, your past mistakes, your current situation, or the people around you who seem to be ahead, it is already too late for you, even though time does not move in straight lines, and human potential has never operated on a single, fixed schedule. And some of the most powerful transformations in history have happened in moments when people were told it was too late to try. Your mind looks at comparisons and turns them into verdicts, telling you that because someone else succeeded earlier, loved earlier, built earlier, healed earlier, you are somehow behind, almost defective. And this silent comparison becomes a heavy chain you drag into every decision you try to make. It convinces you not to start the project you dream about, not to apply for the job you want, not to leave the situation that is draining you. Because what is the point now when the fictional deadline your brain invented has already passed, even though life never gave you a clock in the first place? Then there is the lie that your mind tells you about other people, the story that they are all judging you, watching you, criticizing you, noticing every flaw, every awkward moment, every small mistake you make. When in reality, most people are so consumed by their own insecurities and internal worlds that they barely have the energy to analyze yours. Yet your mind creates an invisible audience everywhere you go and forces you to perform for it. This imagined judgment shapes how you dress, how you speak, what you post, what you hide, and even which parts of your personality you allow to exist. And slowly, without even noticing, you start to become a smaller, edited, filtered version of yourself, all because of opinions that mostly exist only inside your mind. You tell yourself you are being realistic, cautious, socially aware, but what you are really doing is building a psychological cage made of assumptions and then calling it protection, because the bars are invisible. There is also the lie that your feelings are facts, even though emotions are temporary chemical storms moving through the body, often triggered by past memories, subconscious fears, or physical states such as hunger, exhaustion, or stress. Yet the mind takes whatever you feel in a moment and turns it into absolute truth. If you feel unlovable, your mind says that you must be unlovable. If you feel like a failure, your mind rewrites your entire life story to support that feeling. If you feel afraid, your mind creates a narrative of danger, even when nothing is actually threatening you. It is one of the most convincing lies, because emotions feel real and immediate, but that does not make them accurate. And most people build entire identities and destinies around passing emotional weather, not realizing that the storm will pass if they stop declaring it permanent. Your mind also believes the lie that suffering is proof of meaning, that if something is painful, chaotic, dramatic, or complicated, it must be important, valuable, or meant to be. And this is the very reason people stay in toxic relationships, destructive environments, draining careers, and unhealthy cycles for far longer than they should. The brain romanticizes struggle because it is familiar, because it has learned to equate intensity with significance, and calm with boredom, and peace with emptiness. So it pushes you back toward the very things that hurt you, and tells you that the discomfort is just part of the journey, that the pain is romantic, that the betrayal is passion, that the emotional roller coaster is love. This lie keeps you addicted to chaos while calling it depth, and until you challenge it, you will continue to look for fire instead of warmth, noise instead of stability, and tension instead of true connection. Another daily deception is the belief that you must understand everything before you can begin anything, that you must have a perfect plan, complete clarity, and total confidence before taking the first step, when in reality, clarity is born from movement, not from thought. The mind says, wait until you are ready. But ready is a fantasy that never arrives, because every new level requires a version of you that does not exist yet, and the only way to become that person is by taking action before you feel prepared. This lie is extremely convincing because it disguises itself as responsibility and intelligence, but underneath it is fear of failing, fear of looking foolish, fear of being seen while still imperfect. So the mind tells you to wait, and you mistake that delay for wisdom. Perhaps one of the most damaging lies of all is the idea that who you are today is who you will always be, that your current habits, reactions, fears, strengths, weaknesses, and identity are permanent, when in fact, the human brain is constantly rewiring itself in response to environment, repetition, belief, and action. The person you were 5 years ago is already gone, yet your mind still labels you with old definitions, and then uses those outdated labels as proof that change is impossible. You say things like, I'm just not disciplined, I'm bad at relationships, I always mess things up, without realizing that every time you repeat those sentences, your brain takes them as instructions and begins to shape your behavior to match them. In this way, the lie becomes a self-fulfilling prophecy, written and enforced by your own thoughts. Even your memories, which you trust as evidence of what really happened, are often distorted, edited, exaggerated, or softened by the mind. And yet you build your present-day decisions on these emotional reconstructions, not on objective truth. Two people can live the exact same moment and remember it in entirely different ways, and still your mind insists that its version is the only accurate version, and that this memory justifies how you feel, how you act, and how you define yourself now. When you realize that your mind is not a perfect historian, but more like a dramatic storyteller, it becomes clear just how fragile your perception of reality can be. The final and most dangerous daily lie may be the belief that you are alone in your struggles, that no one else feels the confusion, self-doubt, fear, and internal conflict you feel, even though millions of people around the world are fighting silent battles that look different on the surface but feel identical on the inside. Your mind convinces you that you are uniquely broken, uniquely lost, uniquely behind, and that belief isolates you, weakens you, and makes you ashamed of simply being human. In reality, the very thoughts that make you feel so separate are the same thoughts that connect you to almost everyone else. And the moment you recognize this, another lie begins to collapse. And in that space, something powerful happens. Because for the first time, you are no longer fighting your mind alone. You are observing it, questioning it, separating from it. And that is the first real step toward freedom. The truth is that your mind will probably continue to lie to you, because that is what it does in an attempt to protect, to predict, to simplify, and to survive. But now you have something you didn't have before, which is the ability to recognize the lie as a lie. And in that recognition, its power begins to weaken. And in that weakening, you finally gain back the choice that was always yours. The choice to listen or not to listen, to follow or not to follow, to believe or not to believe. And that simple choice, repeated every day, is where your real transformation begins. Thanks for watching. If you found this video helpful or eye-opening, make sure to hit the like button. It really helps the channel grow. And don't forget to subscribe for more practical psychology insights, self-awareness tools, and mind-sharpening advice. Take care, and I'll see you in the next video.